Welcome to UND Insider Weekly alongside Tom Miller, Brad Schlossman from the Grand Forks Herald, Paul Ralston of UND Athletics. I'm Tim Hennessy. Let's talk about soccer. North Dakota has the big win in their pockets over North Dakota State earlier this season, but kind of a rough ride the last time around against South Dakota State, and the tie previous to that 2-2 after having a lead. Guys, what do you think is going on there? It looks like they played well against North Dakota State, okay against South Dakota, not very well against South Dakota State, and now it's Big Sky. Tom, what do you think?
Well, I think, when you have freshmen and sophomores in your lineup as much as Coach Kellogg does, you're going to have your ups and downs. I think you saw that in the South Dakota match. Going up 2-0 early, even though they lost 2-2, though, Coach Kellogg was pretty happy with, the way they got a tie out of that game. He said 3 weeks ago that team went to tie that game, they would have lost it. So strides being made, even though it's probably not ideal in the win-loss tie column.
Brad, I think they beat South Dakota State last year, and then to go down 6-1 in Brookings, what went on there?
Well, I think you're maybe seeing a little bit with Kellogg's team what you saw with Brian Idalski when he first took over, and it might take a little while to get the consistency that you want out of a team, and to incorporate some of his players. A lot of the young players are scoring for him already, but it's not something you can snap your fingers and change right away. It might take some time.
Paul, scoring is obviously a big, I don't know if it's a problem yet or not, but we looked at the Big Sky standings from last year when North Dakota didn't win a game and scored only 3 goals in 9 games. Is that going to be a big problem again this year?
I think it's going to be a challenge, especially from a consistency standpoint, because we've already seen it here early in the season. Didn't get off to a great start of scoring in early games, although they tested themselves against some pretty solid programs. But I think from the standpoint of it's going to be kind of an up and down, like Tom and Brad alluded to. A young team in certain positions, you're going to have games where it clicks and games where it doesn't. So it's probably going to be a little bit of a roller coaster ride at times in the Big Sky Conference season. I envision them having games where they do score a couple of goals, and games where maybe the offense doesn't quite click for them. But it's going to be a challenge at times in Big Sky play.
We'll talk to Coach Kellogg when he comes on about it, but it seems like they want the offense to come from the defense, and not unsimilar to a hockey team.
I think so. I think that's exactly a good analogy there, is that you have to be solid in your own end, and that requires sometimes a lot of emphasis by your somewhat offensive players embracing roles of coming back, tracking back, and making plays on the ball on the defensive end before moving to the offensive side.
Volleyball started conference play on Friday against Montana State, where they won 3-1, where they didn't win last year. In fact, Montana State got them a couple times last year. Then they moved west after that to the University of Montana and won those games. More impressive that they won all the matches, both matches against Montana State and Montana, or the fact they only lost 1 set in the whole deal in their opening Big Sky Conference play?
Well, I'll tell you this, Tim. I did pick them to sweep last week. I was the only panelist to do so. I'd like to remind everyone out there that I did. I just feel like they're heading in. I just feel like they're heading in the right direction. That tournament out in New Orleans, I think, was a big confidence booster for this team, and I feel like they kind of were able to take that to the next level on the road to begin Big Sky play. I'm impressed that they only lost 1 set on a road trip. It's so difficult to be so focused and have that focus to really take over matches, and I think that's very impressive that they were able to do that against Montana State and Bozeman, and against Montana and Missoula.
Brad, we talk about the contributions that the veterans are putting up on this team, without a doubt, Parlick and Munkeby and those, that they're getting enough, I think, from the young players, don't you think?
Yeah, I think that's kind of key to get as much as you can from all over the lineup, and maybe that's something they didn't have right away in the season when they were losing some of those games.
Big Sky 2-0, Tom, so far with Weber State and Idaho State. Probably a couple programs that North Dakota should have some success against, don't you think?
Well, yeah, I said last week that it's always tough to go on the road and win a couple in Montana, no matter what sport you're talking about. But to go out there and do as well as they did, win as convincingly as they did, I think that bodes well for how they can handle this home stretch here.
Well, it's and the Coach Hardy's talked about it a lot. About most of these girls are used to playing 2 or 3 games in a day, let alone 3 games, and I think it's going to be 4 or 5 nights with North Dakota State and on Monday. That shouldn't make any difference, should it?
No, with as many experienced players as they have that come from the junior kind of ranks in volleyball that play, like you said, those tournament style matches, I don't think they'll be too stressed out.
The North Dakota women's golf team is off to their best start in UND history. They've placed 2nd and 3rd so far. 2nd last week at the North Dakota Fall Classic, in Grand Forks. Second year, full Division I status for the golf program. How important is it for UND to have a program be successful after making that transition to Division I? Paul, you're the golf expert on the panel.
Well, you look at it from the standpoint of it was such a challenge to get the right type of athlete, or in this case golfer, in during a transition, because it's tough to say that you have a lot to play for. You get a chance to play in a lot of events and measure yourself, but to get that quality athlete to buy in. What's really impressive for Natalie Martinson's team is that she's brought in a couple of transfers, and they've got a number of youngsters all competing and all buying in. And their skill set is a little different than what they've had than even 3, 4, or 5 years ago. And I just think that it bodes well here into Big Sky play, playing against these Big Sky schools that have a lot of talented players. And I think that having a little success right now is going to bode well for them, not only this year, but down the road as well.
It's difficult, isn't it, Brad, when you have teams in the Big Sky that I'm sure those guys probably get out on a course a lot longer than players at North Dakota. And you really look at Natalie's squad as well. She has recruited players that have played in this climate. How important is that?
Yeah, exactly. I think it's got to be tough to recruit a golfer to Grand Forks, North Dakota, when they maybe see they can go elsewhere and get on the course a lot more often. And but obviously she's doing a good job and getting some players here that she can win with.
Tom, what do you think? She's getting players from Minnesota. She's gotten a transfer from Augustana that's done a nice job for her, leading them in scoring. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think getting into the Big Sky Conference and having a sponsored women's golf sport is big for that program. They can go up against some like schools with the Montana State. So I think when they look back at last year and they don't have any of the same people who scored at last year's meet playing this year, and they're improving, that's got to be encouraging for the future for them.
Let's talk a little football, because the UND football team will be back at home and now open Big Sky Conference play against the Bobcats at Montana State. I don't think it was a good thing that Montana State lost last week to Stephen F. Austin, as they were the number 3 ranked team in the country. I don't know if that bodes well or not so well for North Dakota. I guess you could look at it both ways that time.
Right. Well, I think you could look at it where maybe it exposed some areas that UND can take advantage of that Stephen F. Austin did, especially a quarterback where they're obviously without Denarius McGee, the Big Sky Conference, one of the best offensive players in the league. Backup quarterback Jake Bleskin threw 3 picks, one that sealed Stephen F. Austin's win. So they're going to come in here a little battered, but probably a little angry. I'm sure UND would have liked to wait a week for that Montana State upset to happen.
Brad, how about having a week off to, well, number one, lick your wounds a little bit, but I think North Dakota needed it to get some people healthy. I don't think everybody realizes just how banged up they were in the Montana game, going into that game, and then coming out of it, it's got to be worse.
Well, yeah, you got to be healthy, and like you said, coming off that Montana loss, a week off to sort of regroup, I think will be important for them, and to make sure they can stay focused and not get too discouraged about a couple of early defeats.
Paul, Coach Mussman has said that, just go out, play our game. We're good enough to win. Believe in that, and let the chips fall where they may. How do you like that take on it?
I think that's an excellent statement, because I think you come out of that Montana game, and as Brad was alluding to, I think as a coaching staff, you have to go and say, okay, how can we put ourselves in a position to give ourselves the best chance to win? Is it moving a player to a position where he can best succeed, or just simplifying things, or it allows kind of a week to evaluate, and then and then institute kind of what you need to do moving on from there. So I'm very impressed with that statement, because I think that's exactly the type of confidence that he needs to instill in his team moving forward against a very quality program like the Bobcats.
We'll find out what the panel has to say about the outcome of that game a little bit later on in the program. But